What's up, everyone? This is going to be the first episode of the PlainGains podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Jack, and this is Juan. This podcast, we're going to be primarily talking about a couple of different things: science, fitness, health, and nutrition. And we're keeping it pretty broad with what we're going to be talking about. But today, we're going to be focusing more on just introducing ourselves, introducing the podcast, and introducing what we're going to be talking about, which is going to be mini cutting, cutting in general, and different strategies you can implement. So first, we're just going to give a quick background of who we are. So my name is Jack Maschler. I am almost done with my degree in biomedical engineering at the University of Virginia. After I graduate in 1 week, I will be going into dental school in July at VCU. And I've been training people for as long as I can remember, but officially for money for the past couple of years.
I am Warren Samudio, and I'm also I have a couple like 2 years left for my biomedical engineering degree, specifically focusing more on muscle mechanics and biology. And I've been training people or coaching people for the past, let's say, 3 years in person before I moved online. So a total of 5 years around. And I've been working at many different gyms in Miami, working with, great people, experts, people who are very well known in the field, and that kind of amped up my knowledge in the whole industry. So,
All right, so I think that's a pretty good introduction of who we are. As always, if you guys have any questions, comments, you can reach out to either of us on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Deltoid Factory, and yours is,
at Coach Juan Samu.
yeah. And so those links will also be in the description of the YouTube video if you are interested. Okay, so let's move on to our topic for today, which is going to be getting shredded, different types of ways to get shredded, why people might want to get shredded, and everything that's involved with that. So let's start with a couple of reasons why people want to get shredded.
Couple of reasons. I mean, biggest reason in my uh, where that people come to me is that they just want to look good. That's really it. But the problem with that is that I don't think they understand the I guess the cons of coming at trying to be shredded, because the word shredded is looked at more of a bodybuilding physique nowadays. People look at like a regular person who does not have shredded abs, or someone who does not have like those shredded arms, and they think that's not a good body. They think that it's still like relatively fat, or like not the best body, but that's relatively probably the healthiest body, because as you
Yeah.
start to get more shredded, it starts to be pretty taxing on the body of itself. And it's also extremely difficult to do so. It's a huge commitment. So, but it's also I think a lot of psychology stuff. So they think that to look good, they have to look like a bodybuilder, which is not true at all. And then they underestimate what it's like to look good as like a regular physique. Um, and I guess there are the people who want to be shredded because they define it differently, and maybe they just want to be healthier. Maybe for them it's just about looking good but also feeling good, in the sense of maybe being with their kids and doing the things that they used to do. As for, most teenagers and stuff like that, they just want to get shredded so they could look good, and they don't even consider the cons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think some of the biggest reasons that people come to me is maybe they have a major event coming up, whether that's a wedding, a boys' trip, a girls' trip, whatever it may be. That's definitely one reason why people want to get shredded, along with the reasons you mentioned, just achieving better health, even though getting really shredded is probably not ideal. But for the purposes of this video and podcast, we'll probably just assume shredded is leaner than you are by a significant amount. Doesn't necessarily have to be like sub 10% body fat or whatever it may be. We can say shredded is 15% if you're starting at 30% body fat. So now that we kind of discussed a couple of reasons why people would potentially want to get shredded, let's talk about different ways that people can do so, how exactly a person can lose body fat, and what the different options they have are.
I mean, I think it just comes down to the foundation of calories in, calories out. That is something you can't ignore um, from a surface level view, but even from a cellular level view, you know, laws of thermodynamics, I guess. But I've had people always tell me it's always about like what you eat as well. And then there are accounts like Carnivore MD, pretty popular account, always posting
Yeah,
like, seed oils are bad, don't eat this.
Mr. Paul.
This causes more cancer, this, all this stuff, insulin levels. And, I think everything in moderation is okay. Uh, I think a lot of the stuff that he says, if you really read the studies, you're like, okay, this is not actually what happened, or these are the limitations, or this was the applicable sense, because you have to learn how to apply the study too. It's not just like you get a study and then it applies to everything, to everyone. Um, but I think there could be some truth in the sense of like what you eat. You can't just eat below or less calories in what you burn, and then all those food be Twinkies. Yeah, you're gonna lose weight, but I think if you were to actually kind of be more aware or precise in what you're putting in your body, not only will you feel better, there's a lot of psychological stuff with it. There's a lot of better recovery things that are with it. There's a lot of better, maybe even, losing weight in a sense. It's just again, I've had experience. This is more anecdotal stuff. I've seen a lot of professional trainers say, like, just eat less calories. I'll give you like a certain number of calories and this is it. But when I see the trainers that actually give them, all right, what we're going to do is a little detox thing, maybe have anti-inflammatory foods. Some of those times it tends to work better for some people. So I think there is some truth to that. And when I tried it myself, I did feel better. Before I would just eat less, and that's it. That's the only
Hmm.
way I would lose fat. And then we'll get into like extreme dieting, which is what I do.
Yeah.
But for now, it's like I would like to advise people like you don't just have to eat less calories. Just be aware of what you eat. Don't just eat like three Oreos or like three Pop Tarts a day and then think you're gonna lose weight. You are, but I don't think you're gonna feel uh, good in a way.
Yeah, so the calories in, out comment is definitely a good thing that I want to bring up here. So you're absolutely right. That's definitely the main thing, but there are a lot of factors that people don't necessarily understand that go into the equation. Both the calories in and the calories outside are multifactorial in nature. That means that basically there are multiple variables on each side of the equation that can change the amount of calories that you're consuming and the amount of calories you're burning. For example, on the consuming side, people can consume various amounts of calories and ingest, or not ingest, I guess, absorb various amounts of nutrients from those calories. So if you take two different people, it's not necessarily that if one person eats 3,000 calories that they're going to absorb all 3,000 and the other person is going to be exactly the same. One person may absorb all 3,000 and the other person may only absorb 2,700. And so that's going to change their calories inside. And on the calories outside, there's a lot of different things. There's first your basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories you burn when you're just laying in bed doing absolutely nothing. You have your exercise calories, so how many calories you burn in the gym, walking, whatever other exercise you do in the day, playing sports. Then you have your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically how many calories you're burning doing stuff like fidgeting, talking, doing anything pretty much that's not exercise and not just laying in bed and doing nothing. And so it's not necessarily so simple where you can just eat less food and you'll lose weight because there are other variables in the equation that can affect it. For example, some people have dramatic changes in their NEAT when they change their caloric intake. So if you decrease your calories by a lot, and that causes you to be less energetic, less fidgety, and it brings your NEAT down. Now you're having less calories in, but you're also having less calories out. So the net deficit is not necessarily going to be large enough to give you the weight loss that you're looking for. And we'll go into this in more detail a little bit later when we talk about downsides of really harsh and aggressive dieting. But I think this is a good transition time to move into different dieting strategies, mini cutting versus regular cutting, and what we personally like to do.
As I said, I think I do extreme dieting. So to me, extreme dieting could probably last like a mini cut. A mini cut. I think mini cuts last for anywhere from like 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, I wouldn't really push it more than 6 weeks.
Um, so for me, it takes like 4 weeks, maybe like yeah, like 4 to 5 weeks to kind of get where I want to be. In the sense of like I have a certain type like if I know where I'm like where I want to be, if I have a certain goal, and if I don't go over that goal, I know I could get to like I reach that goal and then in 4 to 5 weeks I could go back to where I want, or maybe like in a little better sense. It's like for example, right now I was 200 pounds like 2 weeks ago. Right, I was bulking up, which you're gonna have to do if you want to build muscle. You can't always maintain. It's not the most efficient way. It's possible. It's just not the most efficient way if you're trying to get bigger. Bulking and cutting to me is like the best strategy. So I bulked up to 200 and I was eating, I would then start to eat like 1,200 calories a day, maybe even less depending. I'm not always starving. Sometimes I am and it starts like, to really bother you, but I guess like I can handle it. And then after 2 weeks, I think I'm down at 185, I think.
Wow, that is, well, I guess, how many pounds did you lose the first week just from water and glycogen?
Uh, I don't know, probably a lot. I mean, I was drinking a lot of water when I was bulking, and I don't really drink a lot of water in general. Like that's something I have to work on.
Yeah, probably.
So when I was bulking, I was drinking a lot of water. But when I cut, I also, what I do is that I drink a lot of sparkling water.
Yeah, that
It tends to,
does
it
help.
tends to decrease my hunger. So when I measured myself, I was like 185. I could be a little more. I don't know if it was because I was in the morning, and sometimes like you weigh a little less from stuff. Um, so to me, I guess I consider that a mini cut. I don't think I've ever really done like a really long cut, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
have to do that. I know there's gonna be a point in time where I can't always mini cut my everything I do. I'm gonna have to eventually reach a certain goal and then slowly get down to where I want to be if I want to maximize results.
Right,
Because this is more so like a fun way for me to get into the bodybuilding sense. I've never really been into bodybuilding, but now I want to be.
right,
Um, I want to see how I look like when I shred down, and then from there, then I could start increasing the cutting phases and be more precise with it. Because if you just tend to rapidly try to cut down, especially with someone who has no experience, it's going to be really hard, and then they're going to end up eating more than they cut down
hmm,
because they just get really hungry. As for different ways to mini cut. I mean, I'll pass that over to you. I don't know if you
yeah,
have more
absolutely.
experience with mini cutting because I know sometimes I do mini cuts if I'm bulking. So if I'm bulking, then I would cut for like 2 weeks, 4 weeks
Hmm.
because you tend to feel like your body's like really bloated and you feel disgusting in a sense. So when I
Yeah,
cut down a little bit, and when I cut down, I don't cut down extreme. I really just take my macros more into consideration, and then I just feel better after 4 weeks, and then I continue.
right. So I think that mini cutting is a pretty interesting concept here. Usually, I would only utilize it, like you mentioned, in between or during a bulk when you get to a point where maybe your appetite's really low, maybe you are getting a little bit too pudgy and you need to be lean for some reason. Maybe that summer's coming up, or you have a bodybuilding show in 30 weeks, or whatever it may be. But mini cutting, we basically just define it as a extremely harsh deficit. So like you said, you lost like 15 pounds in 2 weeks. That's a little bit more extreme than I would usually say. But again, that's the first week you're just going to lose a lot of weight in water and glycogen. So I'd say generally a mini cut is like 1.5 to 3% body weight loss per week. So if you're 200 pounds, then 1.5% is like 3 pounds, and 3% is math that I don't feel like doing right now. So that's a pretty good range there. However, there are some caveats here with mini cutting that I think people extrapolate towards regular cutting and when they should be utilized. So a lot of people, especially right now, mini cuts are extremely popular, or I guess I should say aggressive cuts are extremely popular. And yes, you're probably not going to lose that much muscle if you're training hard and eating sufficient amounts of protein, but there are other potential downsides to cutting extremely fast. For example, people that have jobs or school that requires a lot of mental strength or thinking, it becomes sometimes challenging to think really hard when you have really low carbohydrate intakes, particularly because carbohydrates turn into energy, and a lot of that energy is utilized in brains and thinking. Um, it's actually, this is an anecdotal experience, but I noticed that when I'm in a period of school that is significantly more challenging, or I have to use my brain and do more work, do a lot more hours of thinking, I actually burn more calories and I can eat more and not gain weight, which is nice, but obviously it's stressful as well. And so that's something to take into consideration is, do you need to be thinking? Is your job just getting shredded? If your job is just getting shredded, you probably don't need to think. So you can just eat really low amounts and you'll be completely fine. But maybe you're like a math major or you have to do a lot of work. You're doing your PhD in like biochemistry or something, you got to do a lot of thinking. Then maybe a really aggressive cut is potentially not the right move for you. Um, Also, it makes sense to do aggressive cuts in between bulks, primarily because you're going usually from a pretty high body fat percentage and you're not getting down super shredded. And so when you have a lot more body fat, you can get away energy wise and like based off of how you feel wise on really low calories. But as you get leaner, you may not be able to do the same. So if you are going for more long-term fat loss, really high amounts of body fat loss, maybe you're trying to lose 10 to 15% of your entire body weight, it might be a more useful strategy to mini cut for maybe 4 weeks, take a diet break week, and then do a slower deficit for the next 8 weeks. And then you'll be able to lose the same amount of weight, but you'll probably feel better eating more food, be less hungry, and things like that.
Yeah, one thing that I do tell people is that I don't just get like a certain amount of calories, let's say 1,200 calories a day, which is very little for me. I need like
That's
two,
tiny.
I need like 2,900, if not
Yeah.
more. But keep in mind, like daily, like it's not like I wake up and then I go to work every day, work as a construction worker or anything. Because if that was the case, I wouldn't survive. I would need
Yeah.
food in a sense, because I mean, your body just turns it into energy. So when it comes to like all these things where people do have daily lives, I don't think it's the most applicable way of doing things because then they're sacrificing just most the pros and cons don't weigh out. Like the cons
Absolutely.
tend to outweigh the pros. Like yeah, sure you're losing weight, but then you're also, just sacrificing a lot of other things. I tend to notice when I like am probably going too hard uh when I do movements like this start to slow down,
Hmm.
right? So it's like being active and all these things, talking loud. To me, that just tends to relax a bit, and I start being more slow, being less considerable. So in that sense, I always make sure to start increasing my calories the leaner I get, right?
Yeah.
Like make sure I don't want to lose any muscle either. It's not like I just stick with 1,200 calories and I just do that all for 4 weeks. As the leaner I get, the more calories I add on a little bit.
Yeah.
So
No, that's a good point. At least that's actually a pretty good difference between us two. When I diet, I can't just go straight into really low calories. And the main reason why is because, well, I guess I can. It's not that I don't have the mental strength to do it, but rather it's not as effective for me because when I do drop the calories, my NEAT or non-exercise activity thermogenesis drops so much. I stop moving. I don't even know why. Well, it's neat, so I guess it's unconscious anyway, but my fidgets, my mouth movements, whatever it may be, they decrease a lot. So it doesn't really make sense for me so let's say I drop down to 1,200 calories, for example, I could probably lose the identical amount of weight eating more something like 1,800 or 1,900 calories. So it doesn't make sense for me to drop it immediately down to 12,000 or 12,000, 1,200 because I can lose the same amount of weight at a higher calorie intake because I feel better and I have more motivation to walk more and somehow unconsciously move more. So that's a pretty interesting fact. But then eventually I do end up dropping lower calories once I get to a plateau, but that's a different thing to talk about. So I think that covers pretty well the differences between mini cuts and regular cuts, but I'll just give a brief summary here and a takeaway message. So, for individuals that are not looking for just a short-term fat loss in between bulking cycles, they're looking for long-term fat loss. Maybe they have an event coming up and they have a long time to that event. It's probably going to be more effective and easier for you if you choose a traditional cut. Alternatively, you can mini cut for a short period of time to start off your traditional cut, maybe for 4 weeks, and then increase your calories after a diet break and go to a regular cut after that. But for individuals that are just looking for some quick fat loss, let's say you have 1 week or 2 weeks before a photo shoot, or you are starting to feel a little bit too pudgy in between a bulk, then an aggressive mini cut could be the tool for you. Again, if you have any questions on this, you can reach out to either of us on Instagram and we'd be happy to answer. So now that we've kind of discussed the differences between mini cuts and traditional cuts, I think we should talk about probably how long it might take for someone to get lean. So if they have a vacation that they want to get lean for, we can give some rough estimates for how long it would take them. Do you have any opinions on that?
That is that is very multifactorial. And what I tell my clients is like I want them to commit for at least 4 months because that gives me a good average estimation to be able to see some notable results. Now, I have seen people and I've had clients that can lose, you know, a good amount or look really different in the span of 4 weeks. Uh, but that's not for everyone, and it also depends on the goal. Like, you just want to lose weight, you just want to like change your recomposition a little bit. It can be through 4 weeks, and a lot of that is just through. I'm like, okay, well, if you're, because people's body can sometimes be very easily, how do you call it? I guess disrupted, so sometimes they're really affected by like inflammatory foods per se, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Uh, so when I try to consider, I'm like, well, try to consider a little bit more what you eat, maybe do a little like detox kind of things, then yeah, it can change pretty well or pretty significantly. And I have seen it, especially, and I've seen, many coaches talk like, oh, detox is BS, just eat good, eat a balanced diet. Yes, I also agree with that in the sense that like eating good and having a balanced diet is probably the best diet because, diet, it's not supposed to last forever, right? I don't want
Right.
you to eat a certain strict number of foods for the rest of your life. That's not how I live, you know? Um, so for me, I think 4 months is a good estimation, at least for me to see whether it's progress in the gym, whether it's and that could go with anything like execution wise through workouts or exercises that you do, you know, or just regular mental physical health where they tell me I'm feeling better, I feel more active, I'm getting better sleep. That's also very important. And then it just comes down to physical appearance. In 4 months, it is possible to see some good physical, notable differences. At least for me, like I always make sure to tell them to measure progress in any shape and as many ways as possible. And I try to do it, and I try to ask them to make sure it's nice and like constant. So like if they have like the same lighting to take the first picture, I asked them if they could do it again in that same lighting because sometimes lighting can make a huge difference. So again, for me, I think 4 months is a good estimation for me to just make sure there's progress occurring. I wouldn't want to say like in 1 week I could make you lose this much
Oh
weight.
yeah, absolutely. So I do want to clarify one thing just so the audience is not confused. By the word detox, we are not referring to literal definition, meaning like removing toxins from our body. Changing the food you eat, you're not really detoxing anything, you're not removing old toxins, but changing the foods you eat can provide you with more micronutrients. It can alter the gut microbiome, and it can make you feel better in a plethora of different ways. And all of those detox drinks, they're really just laxatives for the most part. So it's making you just poop a lot. And so that's not what we mean by detox. By detox, he's just referring to changing the foods you eat that will provide you with more nutrients to feel better overall. And so now, in terms of my opinion for how long it might take someone to get lean, I think the best way to answer this question for me is just to provide a particular example that is relevant to potentially a lot of listeners. So let's say that you're a college student starting your second semester of college in the spring. So that would be in late January. So we'll just say early February, and you are looking to be shredded by beach week, which is the first week after you're done with finals. So let's say that's like mid-May or something like that. So you have February, March, April, and half of May. So you have about 3.5 months in that time period. And so when you should start dieting depends on how much percent of your body weight you want to lose and how experienced you are dieting. So if you are less experienced, I would recommend a longer time period. And even if you don't have that much weight to lose, I still would recommend a longer time period if you're less experienced. The more experienced you are, you typically can shorten the time period. And that's purely just because of the fact that you learn your body more, you figure out the amount of calories you need to eat to lose at a particular rate, and it just becomes a lot easier and you become a lot better at it. So let's just say a person that's has a little bit of experience dieting, maybe they've been training for a couple of years and they want to lose 10% of their body weight. So let's say they're like 25% body fat and they want to get down to 15% body fat. So in that case, if they're reasonably experienced, they don't really have too much experience dieting, I would say that probably 10 to 15 weeks is a good time span for them. I wouldn't really be pushing more than 1% weight loss for a person that doesn't have too much experience dieting, unless they're just dieting for a really short amount of time, like 2 to 3 weeks maybe. But for someone that's looking for more sustainable fat loss to look really good on beach week and then potentially for the rest of the summer, I would say for 10% body weight loss or body fat loss, I would say 10 to 15 weeks is probably a pretty good estimate. Okay, so I think
But
that's,
one thing I would like to add too is that, I do agree with people should ease into a diet. Because as I said, if I just drop my calories from 3,000 calories a day to 1,200, that gap is just really gonna make you want to eat a lot.
mhm,
So in return, it's like especially if you go to sleep late at night, and you're gonna get hungrier, and then you're just gonna end up eating all those things you cut off. So I like to
yeah,
tell people to ease into a lower diet so their body can get used to that kind of like starving sensation in a way.
right,
Uh, I've done that in the first kind of couple times, but I know sometimes they do take things to the extreme. And I'm not saying my way is the best way. I mean, this is really all just anecdotal for me, in the sense because I don't always look at the research when it comes to nutrition. I really just go from what works best. I am constantly, trying to just keep up with research to date. But I'm like, and like all here, I'm really just speaking from anecdotal stuff. Like, I'm not here to say like eat this food because according to recent research it says this, this, and this. I tend to stay away from that just because I wouldn't say it's my expertise to look at a nutrition study and then apply it. I mean, I've worked with nutritionists before, and I've had them help understand, and they've helped me understand certain things. And to me, this just has been the best way for me to see, differences not only for me but also for clients. And I mean, it just works well against every other thing that I've tried.
no, absolutely. And on that fact of easing into a diet, I do have a study that I can bring up here. It is by Dr. Levine, who is an MD PhD, and it is called Non-Exercise Activity Thermogenesis, NEAT. It's just a research article. And pretty much what's outlined here is that NEAT changes based off of your caloric intake. So in periods of underfeeding, which would be a caloric deficit, your NEAT can decrease, and in overfeeding, your NEAT increases. And so this amount it decreases and increases varies significantly between individual and individual. So if you have no experience dieting, then it's most likely better to take a slower approach just in case you are one of those people whose NEAT increases a lot in overfeeding and decreases a lot in underfeeding. I do have a couple of friends who are like that, and it can be extremely drastic to the point where if he wants to gain weight, he's got to eat 4,000 calories, but losing weight, he's got to eat like under 2,000 calories, but he can maintain weight in between like 2,500 and 3,500 calories. So there's a lot of variability between people, and it's not necessarily that simple. So taking a slower approach if you have no experience, I think is pretty useful. Okay, so we talked about how long it will take, slow versus fast deficits, all of that sort of stuff. So I think that we should talk about different dieting protocols that you can use that might help you, as well as fitting in a lifestyle. That was going to be the main topic of the video, is figuring out how people can get lean or get shredded when still having while still having a life, because I think it's unrealistic for people to just want to get extremely shredded and stop going out with their friends to go eat, or have to tell your parents that you can't have the dinner that they made for you that night because you don't have enough calories left, or whatever that may be. So let's talk about different dieting protocols, and how you can fit in different foods. And if you have an event coming up where you know you're going to overeat, what you should do to um, plan for that. So I think I'll talk about the first protocol. It's one that I like to use pretty often, especially in clients that don't have a lot of experience dieting, and it's a protocol that is pretty much utilizing high calorie days and low calorie days to achieve a weekly deficit. And so when you start off the diet, you can bring their calories, or a client or you, for example, down to maintenance, except for maybe 2 days of the week, you drop them by like an 1,000 calorie deficit those 2 days. And so that way, oh, and you can make those 2 days days that are not the hardest training days. So probably not leg days, because leg days usually you need a little bit more fuel for them. So let's say you do like, there's 7 days in a week, so you do 3 days of maintenance, a day of 1,000 calorie deficit, 2 days of maintenance, and then 1,000 calorie deficit, and then you're back. And so that way you'll have a 2,000 calorie weekly deficit, and you're gonna be losing weight pretty slowly, but you should be losing weight at a rate that is trackable. And so then once that eventually plateaus, instead of decreasing the calories throughout every single day, you can just add another low day. So then you'll go from 5 high, 2 low, to 4 high, 3 low, and then you can just continue doing that until you get to a point where you're at 5 lows and 2 highs, or whatever amount that you want. And I think that works really well for a lot of people, because it kind of eases them into the diet, gets them used to the feeling of being hungry when they're in the 1,000 calorie deficit days, but also is not limiting their NEAT potentially, is not reducing the amount of cognition they have for their job, and other things like that.
Yeah, so that's I think that's very similar to the strategy I sometimes use, which is I believe mutilating calories. So on the days that you don't really, work out, or you're relatively just sedentary, I don't really eat a lot those days.
Hmm.
I eat a lot on the days that I do work out, and I eat more in the days that I have leg days and stuff like that. But I think that's a good way to kind of like, again, just to, as you said, it gets used to the days where it's like you don't eat a lot, but you get used to that little feeling of like, oh, I guess I could have a little more food. And at the end of the week, you end up, but you also feel good because the next day you do get that little more food, but then you can also burn it away because you aren't as sedentary as you were, let's say on Monday, as you are on Tuesday. And at the end of the week, you end up eating the same amount, if not less, than you would as someone just eating a strict number or a constant number across the board of, let's say, 1,300 calories all week, right? So this one, I believe, like the utilating method has worked a lot for me.
Hmm.
I've tried that one before. So I mean, I think that's a good way to go at it, especially for beginners. I mean, even then, when someone is starting to train, I don't like to always throw uh, their nutrition plan and their training plan all at once, because if you tend to throw all these different things at people, they might get like bombarded with all those things, and then they might not end up doing it. So I was like, let's just get consistent with the training first, and
Hmm.
then once I see that you're doing good with that, then we could add on the aspect of nutrition. So then, because the training has already become like somewhat second nature to you, so it's not like a new thing anymore, and that has sometimes, or probably most of the times, worked for people who are just starting off, and then they've
Hmm.
gotten used to one part of the of the variable, and now they can get used to the nutrition. And then when you combine those two together, it just works wonders. I mean, you need both, right?
Yeah.
You
No,
can't really.
especially for people that don't really have a lot of experience training. Um, I just say try to have some source of high quality protein in all of your meals and let's get the training done, calories, whatever. Because a lot of Americans, I think the average American consumes 1 gram per kilogram of protein per day, which is not enough to be in the range for building muscle. Like we'd want to see at least like 1.6 grams per kilogram of protein. So a little bit under there. But yeah, so just focusing on protein and starting resistance training can be extremely valuable for beginners. But moving on here, another strategy we can use for dieting is one that I really like and I use myself, and that would be matching your food volume, or I guess matching your calories while increasing your food volume. Or I guess matching your food volume with lower calories. Whatever, you understand what I'm saying. So you can basically go from eating food that is really calorie dense, let's say like ground beef, to food that's less calorie dense, like chicken breast. And so you can eat the same volume of food with a lot lower calories. And so that usually ends up making people fuller and they'll tend to just eat less calories naturally just by changing the food volume that they're eating. Um, do you have any
Yeah.
foods
So
that you like?
I was to give an example of that. That's like you get ice cream, for example. It's a pretty calorie dense food. It has a lot of calories, and you can eat it, but you might not be full afterwards. You might want more, and you might, add another scoop, and you're constantly eating it. But then if you get something like, let's say, a piece of steak, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if that's the best example. It
I
depends.
just say if we're using ice cream, you may as well just compare like Ben and Jerry's to like Halo Top.
Probably, yeah. But then if that's the case, it's like using a less of a calorie dense food is something that you can eat and it makes you feel full, at least fuller than the ice cream itself, and you have less calories in doing so. I think ice cream was more like of a junk food kind of thing.
Sorry, the train. Can you hear the train in the background?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh well. Yeah, I live right next to the train tracks, so it's kind of annoying, but we'll just continue here. To give some examples of some foods that are pretty voluminous that I personally like to utilize when I'm dieting. First, I got any type of potato where you're not super roasting it in a lot of oil. So that could be hash browns, it could be baked potato, it could be mashed potato, any of those sorts of things. Those are extremely good. I'm actually pretty sure that potatoes are the number one food on the satiety index, which is basically they had people rank how full they felt after eating different types of foods, and boiled potatoes was the number one food in terms of fullness, which just makes perfect sense. Potatoes have a lot of water, and if you don't roast away all of the water, they're pretty voluminous for the amount of calories that they have. And so one thing that I like to do, and I eat this essentially every day, is I take hash browns, which I can buy from the store, Harris Teeter, pretty cheap, and I just like fry them up a little bit in like 10 grams of oil, and then I add my egg whites to the hash browns, and that makes egg whites tolerable because I think plain egg whites don't taste very good. So then when I add like ketchup or something or hot sauce with the hash browns and the egg whites, it makes a pretty good scramble that's really, really voluminous for the amount of calories it is, while also tasting pretty good. Do you have any particular
Yeah.
food examples you like?
Well, speaking of potatoes, I think sweet potatoes are one of my favorite options, at least for carbs. A lot of people think that they have more calories because they're sweet potatoes, but they
Mm-hmm.
have relatively the same amount of calories. And they honestly do make me feel really full after I eat them, and I love sweet potatoes. Um, as for eggs, I think people get really scared about like wait, what is it, the yolk, the yellow part,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but that does have a lot of nutrients in it. I think half of the protein of the egg is in the egg yolk,
Yeah.
uh, and it does have a lot of fats, but fats aren't bad. A lot of people consider like those, oh, you're eating fats, it's bad for you. Fats are actually really good for you. Your body
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. The only downside is just it just has more calories than the egg yolk. So It's like if you have the ability to eat the yolk of the egg, like that's completely fine. There's nothing bad in there. You just have to sacrifice a little bit of the calories. If you have that space, I think that's okay.
Hmm.
If you want to be more of a strict person on the limiting the calories, I think it's also fine to cut off the egg yolk, but I think you shouldn't cut it off for the reason of, oh, it's like the worst part of the egg. The egg white is like the most important part. Like
Yeah. No,
I
I
wouldn't say
agree.
it's like,
So one thing about eggs that people are always, well, first, um, yeah, the egg yolks are definitely the best tasting part of the egg, so I'm just gonna say that. I don't know if it's controversial or whatever, but I think that's obvious. But second, I think what people are most concerned about when they're talking about eggs is cholesterol. And so a lot of people are just confused about what cholesterol is, and we can go into this in a completely other video, but to briefly just explain, cholesterol is a molecule, and it is an amphipathic molecule, and it's utilized in to carry other molecules in your blood. It's utilized in your cell membranes, lots of things. Cholesterol by itself as a molecule, we synthesize it. It's not necessary to consume, but it is not bad by itself. When people get confused, is they're like, oh, but I have LDL and HDL, and those are like good and bad cholesterol. But the cholesterol molecule is not LDL. LDL is a low density lipoprotein, which is a protein that carries cholesterol and other types of fatty molecules in your bloodstream. And so what has a higher effect on your serum LDL is actually the saturated fat in the egg, not the cholesterol in the egg. And so that's one thing that I have to take into consideration because I'm genetically predisposed to having high LDL and high cholesterol. And so I try and limit my saturated fat intake. So that's sometimes why I would opt for egg whites over eggs or whole eggs. But obviously, some saturated fat is okay. I believe the American Heart Association recommends less than 14 grams of saturated fat per 2,000 calories consumed, for those wondering. Other types of foods that I like for dieting, um, protein oats. If you make them right with a banana, you can get a ridiculous amount of volume for really low calories. Right now, what I've been doing is 20 grams of oats, which is nothing, 160 grams of Fairlife milk, 60 grams of whey protein, and then a banana. And that whole thing is like around 500 calories, and it is a huge bowl. It's like that big, that wide, and it is pretty filling. So that's definitely one breakfast that I like to use for cutting as well.
uh, for me, I think a lot. I love yogurt, vanilla
Hmm.
yogurt only vanilla yogurt. I'm
Yeah.
not a fan of vanilla yogurt. But I consider yogurt to be more of a carbohydrate. So whenever I do eat yogurt, I make sure to pair it with a protein.
Hmm.
And it really fills me up a lot. Like it's not
Interesting.
saying that. For example, I mean, the other day it was like a really weird plate. I just had it because I had yogurt and then I just had like salmon right next to it.
Yeah.
You know,
Hey, why
and
not?
it's like it's not a daily thing I do, but it's like whatever, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And I haven't eaten anything that day. Like I really haven't. I woke up, I have my green juice. I always have like a certain green juice. It's like an
yeah,
AG1 kind of thing, but I make it myself with my own little things.
yeah.
Um, and then I wait till like the late afternoon, and I'm like, well, I just realized I haven't had anything to eat. And the one thing is like, if you're constantly working, and this is also can be a con. I know a lot of students who become somewhat anorexic because they get so stressed out with exams that they don't eat at all.
Yeah,
That is
that's true.
also not something you want to like lean in towards too. And I have had things where it's like there will be days where I'm like so busy with everything I don't, consider time for to eat. That's not entirely healthy. So it's like that day I just had like, and like yogurt and I paired it up with salmon and that pretty much filled me up with the entire day.
Yeah.
So it was relatively something new. And then I started doing that more often. Obviously not pairing it with salmon, but I would like just combine yogurt with some sort of protein.
Yeah.
And it would be like a good snack because it's not super calorie dense. It can be depending what you add. I'm not saying to add peanut butter with it and then mixing it up and then
Right.
like you have to be more considerate about those things. But it's like just like a vanilla yogurt, some any kind of protein.
Hmm.
Um, I think that would do good. That could do
Yeah.
wonders.
I have vanilla
Add
yogurt in my
sparkling
fridge right
water.
now.
Yeah, and then add sparkling water, you're fine.
Yeah. No, that's good. I do count vanilla yogurt as a protein if you get the like high protein 0% fat yogurt like the Oikos brand. Um,
Yeah, there are those. Yeah, I guess
but
it's I
definitely like regular yogurt I would consider to be a carb. So unless you're getting like the high protein yogurt, it's not really that much protein. Um, but yeah, you can also always just add protein powder to the yogurt and it tastes pretty good in my opinion, especially if you get a nice flavor.
I add yogurt to my protein shakes sometimes.
Yeah,
And keep
that's
in
a
mind
pretty good.
when I do lose weight, I tend to go for more of a green protein shake. So I add like spinach instead of peanut butter.
Interesting.
And then just because if you add peanut butter into the protein shake and stuff, it just tends to be more calorie dense, which
Hmm.
is fine if I'm bulking up.
Yeah.
But when I'm cutting, I would just switch like my flavor to like the green flavor stuff.
Hmm.
And it just adds variety too, you know.
Yeah. I usually don't have protein shakes in general, or like I guess that's not the right way to describe it. I don't drink my protein shakes. If I'm consuming whey protein, which I do every day, it's gonna be in some form of eating. So whether that's like overnight oats or protein oats in the microwave or protein in yogurt, I'm probably not gonna drink a protein shake when I'm cutting just because drinking fluids doesn't fill me up as much as I would like it to. So if I compared just like making a protein pudding out of just like protein powder and then like small amounts of milk until it gets the pudding consistency and then like putting it in the fridge for a couple of hours, I'd much rather have that than just having like a protein shake with water. Um, but that's just my preference. That's not to say protein shakes fill up a bunch of other people. It's just not necessarily the optimal situation for me.
Yeah, I think people, it's important once people actually start to be more considerate of what they eat. I, it is possible to see some pretty drastic changes in a short time period if that's their first time doing it. Um, and I've seen it myself. I mean, it's like, all right, like let's just be more considerate, you know, buying uh, like what is it, anti-inflammatory foods again, things like that. You just have like the person could just tell you like what their body reacts most to, and
Hmm.
then you can kind of like work around that. And it just makes a big difference, you know, like you're constantly eating less. But not, it's not that, it's just a lot of it is you're eating just lower calorie dense foods that are filling you up, which is easier to maintain the diet
Yeah.
or the strict food thing. But it's also you feel better because now you're actually feeding your body certain nutrients and vitamins. And even I think in a regular diet, it's difficult to uh, get the right amount of vitamins in or minerals in. Sorry. Sometimes like not everyone gets like the sufficient amount of minerals without even knowing. They think that they just eat healthy and then they have everything set.
Yeah,
Most of the time, sure, but I mean, I think minerals are a little bit difficult to get into a regular diet as well. So, uh, yeah, I mean, it just comes down to just being more considerate of what you eat. It can make a huge difference. Like I
definitely.
really
In terms
put
of
a stamp on that.
the minerals, consuming them, we could make a whole episode on this, but just a good strategy for people to take home is you can cycle the fruits and vegetables you have each week. So let's say maybe one week you have apples, broccoli, carrots, and blueberries, and then the next week you do like blackberries, raspberries, bananas, and I don't know, cauliflower or whatever. And that way you're getting nutrients um, periodically, and it's kind of like daily undulating vegetable periodization almost. But yeah, that's one good strategy. And that's not to say that you need to eat all of these extremely healthy foods to be successful. I'm definitely a proponent of flexible dieting. For example, I have barbecue chicken sandwiches like every single day. And really, it's just I think it comes down to cooking. Like my barbecue chicken sandwiches taste great. I put the chicken thighs in a crock pot. I put some liquid smoke, salt, pepper, spices, whatever, and it's basically just like shredded chicken. And I put like low calorie barbecue sauce in there, and it tastes close enough. Obviously, it's not going to be quite as good as real barbecue, but it's close enough. And I eat it with regular buns, and it's low calorie. And so I don't know if you know like Cole, he's also a flexible dieting person. I'm definitely on the team of flexible dieting, but you can just utilize more maybe fruits and vegetables to allow yourself to have more flexibility in the types of foods that you want to eat.
Yeah, I mean, I for sure am a flexible dieter. Like there'll be one day where I just eat, I guess, quotations, healthy foods. And
Yeah.
then the next day I'll wake up, I'll drink my green juice, and then I'll go to like midnight cookies and cream and I'll get like a sprinkled cookie with ice cream all over it.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I'll just watch a movie eating that. And speaking of that, watching TV as you eat just you tend
Oh
to eat
yeah.
more calories
Not great.
without because you're not focused on what you're eating, and then your
Yeah.
body's like, wait, I want more. So I'm all about flexible dieting, but I think when somebody comes up to me and they go, hey, I'm like I have a wedding in like 4 weeks, 2 months per se, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to be a little stricter on that.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think the strict in the being strict in the beginning for me has worked more because it gives a person structure. And if a person doesn't have structure and you just give them like a certain amount of calories to eat, they can get lost in that.
Yeah.
So I feel like giving them some sort of structure with like these relatively, again, quotations, healthy foods or just certain types of foods, just naturally it's easier for them to follow
Hmm.
because they have something to look to or like they feel like they have a guide now. If you just give them the calories, they just feel like, okay, I just could just eat less than this, but like, is this less than this? Is this less than this? And then they just don't know. And then, picking three decisions or more just becomes undecidable. So I just believe if somebody has a certain date, I think it's cool or I think it's okay to have like a strict diet for a certain time, but it's not something that I would recommend keeping the entire, like, for a long period of time. Again, a diet
Yeah.
is not supposed to last forever.
Right.
Uh, so
Okay. I think you're absolutely right, flexible dieting in that aspect. I think we should segue onto how people should go about, let's say they're dieting and they want to lose as much weight as possible in as fast time as possible, but they don't want to sacrifice relationships with their friends and family, whether that's going out and drinking on the weekends or um, eating meals with their friends or whatever it may be. What strategies do you think they should implement? Should they do anything to prepare for these events if they know about them in the past or in the future, or I guess know about them in the past? What do you think they should do to prepare for these events?
I mean, if I'm if I'm coaching somebody and I'm starting off with that because if I'm coaching somebody and I give them the span week of 4 months, I make sure to tell them like try to limit the alcohol. Try not to do it just in the 4 months so I can make sure you're being consistent and I can follow along with the progress. Now being realistically, especially if you live down here in Miami and Florida, like partying's like every night. People go out every night. People drink alcohol every weekday, every weekend as well. Um, one thing I like to do is drinking like diet sodas. People think that they're dangerous because of their artificial sweeteners, but
Yeah.
that's not disrupting the microbiome. I think it was. I read a study on that, but it wasn't what the other like influencers on social media made it seem like. Oh, don't drink artificial sweeteners because they disrupt the microbiome. Like you read the study and then you're like, I think that was just I can't remember off the top of my head.
No,
First of
yeah.
all, your
A
body
lot of them are in vitro studies, and we don't know really what's going on with our gut microbiome at all. I can talk more about that in the future, but yeah, we have no idea what's going on for the most part.
Yeah, but essentially though, your body has good bacteria and your body has bad bacteria. And then that's something we could get into as well with that. But as for drinking diet sodas, I think it's very helpful because your body drinking something sweet kind of tricks your body into thinking that you got like those calories that you wanted or that sweetness that you wanted. And it kind of like in a way takes away that sweetened craving, right? So if I'm eating food or whatever, I'm going out and I get like a diet soda that has 0 calories, I drink it and I'm like, oh, I guess my sweet craving is gone now. Like I've got what I wanted in a sense, and it still tastes good. I personally can't taste the difference between, soda and regular soda, diet soda and regular soda. As for alcohol, I don't drink alcohol.
Hmm.
Uh, I know a lot of people that do, almost
Yeah.
everyone. Uh, and when they go out, I think the best way to do is just limit it. Uh, you just can't. I Yeah. I mean, just you could just limit it in what you drink. Maybe sometimes people go out and they just aren't considerate about how much they're gonna drink, and they just end up drinking a lot more than they need. I was like, well, maybe go in having a certain number of drinks, as a limit.
Right.
and then try to make that last, or maybe like incorporate that with some water in between. I don't know if you have like any ideas to like limit alcohol in sense of that. To me, it's
Definitely.
really coming down to those
Um,
things.
yeah, I personally do drink alcohol occasionally. I wouldn't call myself a big drinker or anything like that, but I do like to go out with my friends every once in a while and have a couple of drinks. And so I would say if you're one of the people who's like me and you like going out and maybe you like drinking, I think that you can definitely fit that into a diet, but there are a few things that you might want to do in order to prepare for the drinking. Like let's say you're in the middle of a diet, you're going well, but your friends are like, all right, we got to go party on Friday night. Like, let's go. And it's Monday. So you're like, okay, you're going to go party on Friday. You know this for sure. In advance, maybe 1 to 2 days before, you can drop your calories if you know that you're going to go out and have more calories that day. So it's kind of like the high low strategy. For example, a couple of weekends ago, I went to a vineyard. And so the 2 days leading up to the vineyard, I ate 1,300 calories instead of my typical 1,900 calories. And so I lost a bunch of weight those 2 days. And then when I had a couple of glasses of wine at the vineyard, I did not increase my body weight significantly the following day. And so that way, budgeting your calories the day before, it just allows you the flexibility to go over your calories on the actual day. Alternatively, you could decrease the number of calories you're consuming on that actual day. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend this because a lot of people just um, if you decrease your calories too much on a day that you're going to be drinking, you just get way too drunk because you don't have enough food and calories in your system to handle and process the alcohol very well. And so I definitely prefer the method of a couple of days before reducing your calories. And then in terms of if you do have to reduce your calories the same day, make sure you're taking calories away from carbs or fats. Remember, 1 gram of alcohol is 7 calories, and 1 gram of carbs is four, and 1 gram of fat is nine. So you can take accordingly from each one of those. Just make sure you're not going below 9 grams or below zero point 0.3 grams per pound of body weight of fat, just so you can maintain your hormone synthesis. In terms of what actual drinks you should probably be focusing on if you're trying to limit your caloric intake from the alcohol, I would say any sort of mixed drink that's with like a diet soda. So maybe that's a diet rum and coke, maybe it's a vodka soda. But if you really want to limit your overall alcohol intake, I would recommend just getting a liquor on the rocks. One thing that I really like is tequila on the rocks. If you have just the straight tequila, there's 0% chance you're drinking that extremely fast because it's a really strong flavor. And so by getting something that's extremely strong in flavor, you're going to drink it way slower. So one, that's going to make you less drunk, which will probably be better for your sleep recovery and losing weight in general. Two, it's going to cost less in the long run because you're probably going to need less overall drinks. And three, it's going to save a lot on calories. I believe tequila on the rocks is like maybe 70 to 90 calories, depending on what pour you get. So those are definitely some good strategies that you can utilize, and just make sure to plan accordingly and try not to go over the top and have alcohol all the time, because doing so will not only increase your overall cortisol levels, decrease your recovery, decrease your muscle mass. It will also just be counterintuitive to your goals. But I would say don't sacrifice different experiences. Like if it's a once in a lifetime or you really want to hang out with your friends that night, absolutely go for it. Do it, but just take the precautions that I mentioned and you'll have a much better time.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I mean, you could also add cardio on one of those days too, like 45 minutes. I sometimes do that. I mean, my kind of way is just if I'm gonna go out and eat on a certain night, I just don't eat anything for that day, and then I just eat a lot for that night. But again, when it comes to drinking, I wouldn't recommend that because you said you could easily get drunk, or more. You could easily get more drunk. If you don't eat anything that day. So I mean, I don't know. I think your advice is great. So
Yeah.
pretty much all my
Um,
points.
Definitely a good point about the cardio. That's actually something that we can talk about now, because I think we finished talking about different strategies you can utilize when you want to go eat out or drink out. So, cardio, what type of cardio do you like doing? How do you manage cardio yourself or for your clients? Or how do you make it fun?
For me, I I like doing less cardio. A lot of my clients, when I tell them I have to like they have to run or like they have to do cardio, they think of like running really hard on the treadmill. First of all, that can be pretty taxing in and of itself. Any kind of like hit sort of training is pretty taxing on the body. Uh, so I add cardio at the maybe sometimes at the end of a sessions or maybe on a separate day. I like adding it on a separate day where I don't do anything. Uh, and that's really just for the calories and for the health of walking. You don't you're gonna burn more calories in the short term doing some sort of cardio than you would in a weight training session, uh, most of the time. And I just prefer to program lists because lists just allows me to get certain things done when I'm on the treadmill or just walking around, whether it's listening to a podcast, reading a book.
Hmm.
And as I do that, or being on a call. As I do that, I just, just did the cardio I want, got the health benefits of walking because walking itself is a great exercise. It's not just for losing calories.
Hmm.
It has just a lot of cardiovascular benefits and other benefits as well. Um, so I think list for me is my preferable way. I know there are ways that you can do to burn like the most amount of calories in a short period of time of like, increasing the speed, then decreasing it, or you can probably just like increase the incline of the treadmill,
Hmm.
make it a little harder. But I really just program around 45 minutes of lists and like on a separate day. Like if you're training 3 times a week, let's do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Then we'll just do Thursday for 45 minutes of like walking cardio or just any cardio you want. You can also have fun. I know cardio can be boring. So sometimes what I like to do is I like to do like 5 minutes on one cardio machine, then go 5 minutes on another cardio machine. And that to me is just kind of fun. I don't
Hmm.
know. I have fun doing that, and I end up like burning more calories than I wanted, so that's good. Um, but again, I personally most of the time I don't really do any sort of cardio like that. At least in the gym, I do like tricking, which is like a mix of like parkour and gymnastics and martial
Oh,
arts and
interesting.
breakdancing.
Yeah.
And like that in and of itself is kind of my leg day because all the jumping on the spring floor and the flipping,
Hmm.
the twisting and the jumping on the trampoline, like I think those like open gym hours last for like 2 to 3 hours. I
Yeah.
think that's like my cardio for the week.
Yeah.
Um, so
That's good. I think LISS is a great option for individuals that want to have like a set cardio that's maybe close to their gym time. So whether that's elliptical, incline walking, biking, whatever it may be, that's definitely a great option. But some other more fun cardio that I like to implement, personally, I recently started playing pickleball, which is kind of like mini tennis mixed with table tennis, and I can play it for like 2 or 3 hours. It burns a ridiculous number of calories and it's not that cardiovascularly tiring, and you don't really need that much athleticism. So I think that's a great option. For those of you that can play golf, if you walk the course, like let's say you walk 9 holes carrying your bag, that is going to burn a ridiculous number of calories just because your bag is relatively heavy. The course is extremely long. So, yeah, that will induce more fatigue than if you did different types of cardio. But a lot of different cardio fatigues people differently. For example, I'm pretty sure Alberto Nunez said that hit cardio like doesn't bother him at all. He could do hit cardio every single day and it wouldn't affect his training. So that's definitely something that might affect others a lot more. For example, for me, I can't do a lot of hit cardio or else it does affect my training. Like there's no way I'm doing sprints and then going to train legs the next day, or else I'd be absolutely destroyed. So I think finding different cardio that you enjoy, whether it's a different sport, basketball, football, whatever it is, that doesn't impact your training significantly, that allows you to do it as much as you need for just entertainment and also life. And if you're unable to do a particular type of cardio, just taking multiple walks throughout the day and trying to get at least 8,000 steps is going to be great for decreasing your all-cause mortality. I think 8,000 is the number that the most recent meta-analysis landed on. I could be wrong, so if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments below, but it's definitely around something like 8,000 steps per day. And if you work a 9 to 5 job where you are at the desk and there's not really much you can do, there are a few strategies you can implement there. One, if it's possible to use standing desk, standing is going to burn more calories than sitting, and so alternating between standing and sitting can be useful. Also, one other strategy that I like to implement in people that have desk jobs is to have a really small water bottle. So if you have a smaller water bottle and you make sure that you have to get your water intake or whatever, you're going to have to get up from your desk and go fill up your water bottle significantly more often. And those steps definitely do add up over time. And also, it's just good for productivity to get your head away from the desk for a little bit. Do you have any thoughts on people that are more sedentary, what strategies they can implement?
Um, maybe well, I would like to bring up the whole thing about people being obsessed with like burning fat specifically.
Hmm.
Just because they think that if they heard that staying in the zone two, for example, or just walking on the treadmill burns more fat, I think you might end up burning less fat throughout the entire day if you intentionally try to burn fat in that certain area. So I don't think you should worry too much about trying to specifically burn fat
Yeah.
in those treadmill sessions. Um, as for cardio, I think those were all the points that I can come up to my that can come up to the top of my head. Um, I guess those things. I mean, it could just depend on the job too that you have. You know, you definitely could like if you're a personal trainer walking around carrying weights, like you burn a lot of calories, and that's why back then I would always eat so much food and I wouldn't gain weight. People think that I
Yeah.
have a fast metabolism. That's like, well, no, I'm constantly working out like from 5 a.m. to like 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's already a pretty high activity. Swimming, walking, I guess any sport you like is just great. Even though a lot of people like sports, they don't do them. Like they don't play them. They're like, oh
Right.
yeah, I love basketball, but they don't play it. Like making a day to play a sport that you like, I think it makes a huge impact because a lot of the times people get hungry when they're bored or when they're not happy. And I know
Hmm.
there was a recent study talking about like if you're happy or something like that, if you're enjoying something, it distracts you from eating food because when you're distracted or when you're not distracted, your body just goes into eating food. And some people eat food for uh, just just to I guess to relieve the boredom.
Yeah.
So doing something that is enjoyable and makes you happy can really distract you from eating a lot more calories than what you really need,
Hmm.
and help you be more consistent. So I think that's good.
Yeah, that's a great point. I like to use that myself. Whenever I'm feeling hungry on a diet, I will just leave my apartment and go on a walk, and then I come back and I'm less hungry than I was when I left, and it's just because I was sitting in place. One point I do want to bring up, just so people know, is fasted cardio for natural lifters does not have any intrinsic benefits over non-fasted cardio because just the way nutrition partitioning works. Um, yeah, you will be pulling fat stores when you are burning calories, potentially, assuming you have no glycogen left to burn first, you will probably be taking fat away from the adipose tissue for calories when you're doing the fasted cardio. But then when you eat your food, more of the fat that you consume or more of the calories that you consume will just be converted into stored body fat. So the overall energy balance is what matters more than whether you're doing it fasted or non-fasted. And now this doesn't necessarily apply to unnatural lifters, but I would say that that's outside the scope of this podcast.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit for fasted cardio just comes down to the person's preference of like naturally eating less calories because they're doing some sort of fast.
Hmm.
When they do the fast, I think it's the fasting that's making them lose calories. And I'm like, well, yes, because you're just eating less calories and doing that. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily the magic of the fast. Well, maybe I don't know. All I know is that the biggest benefit for fasting is just really just comes down to that, at least from my
Yeah.
point of view. Um, but that reminds me, like, can we like take a moment and talk about insulin? Because a lot of people are scared about that. And
Yeah,
it's like they think
definitely.
that like is going to one hormone out of millions, like, there's a lot of
I don't
hormones in
know
the
if it's
body.
million. Maybe there's a lot. I don't know if it's millions, but
There's a lot. Maybe I'm
definitely
over
hundreds.
maybe I'm over exaggerating, but definitely there's a lot of hormones in the body, and they think that
Yeah.
one hormone is going to cause like a huge drastic change. Like if you look at a picture of the diagram of the hormones and how like the
Oh, it's
chemical
insane.
processes of the
Yeah.
body, there's so much. There's just so much. But I don't know if you want to take a moment and explain how like spike in insulins may not really change much.
Right. Yeah, so pretty much insulin is a hormone that is released in order to help shuttle carbohydrates or nutrients into cells for storage after you eat. Um, and so in most healthy individuals, it's not really something that they need to worry about because assuming they're meeting their physical activity, you're going to be relatively insulin sensitive. And so people that are not obese, not overweight, or people that don't have obesity and don't have overweight, um, they don't really need to worry about insulin for the most part. I would say I think it's an overrated thing for natural lifters that are healthy and fit to consider. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know, when somebody comes up to me and they're like, "Oh, it's not about calories in, calories out. It's all about the hormone insulin." I don't know, I just let them talk and kind of just like ask them questions until they just reach a plateau, I
Yeah, I
guess.
mean, I think a lot of the people that say that don't even know what insulin is, what it's produced by, um, like how it works, what receptors it works on in the cells. So I think if you don't have a basic understanding of how that works, which we probably will make a video on insulin, glucagon, and other hormones related to like nutrition partitioning and how different nutrients are shuttled inside, outside of muscles and different cells. But if you don't have a basic understanding of that, I don't think you should be trying to make claims of, oh, I'm not insulin sensitive enough, unless you've been obviously in contact with maybe a coach that is really knowledgeable or a doctor who can provide more insight on that.
Yeah, if there's one thing where I do consider insulin more of a bigger factor would be like, um, I guess when you have ketoacidosis or when you go through ketoacidosis and then you go through dialysis. Um, I think that is like more of a considerable thing. That's something I tend to stay away from because I know that requires certain nutrition that does tend to be more serious on that side. Um, but other than that, I mean, I don't think you should be too concerned about insulin and spikes in insulin and stuff like that. I mean, your body
Right.
is just your body, and some things are just natural with whatever you do. Just because something that is bad for a short period of time, like a study like this, like a study would say like a spike in insulin is bad. It's like for how long? Like how long did that last? It's like did you mix it up with like different foods throughout the day? Because a lot of studies just have like this. They just eat like one type of food and then they're like spike in insulin. That's bad. It's like, well, yeah, but mix this in with all the other foods you're eating throughout the day. You know, like
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's the same thing with like spikes in blood sugar where people are like, yeah, this has a lower glycemic index or higher glycemic index, and so it spikes your blood sugar faster than something else. And for an otherwise healthy individual, having a large spike in blood sugar is not really going to be detrimental in any aspect.
yeah, and I think when people see the glycemic index, because it looks like from like green to red, or like there's some greens to like darker color, depending which one. They tend to like immediately correlate that with like good and bad.
Yeah,
So, like if something has like a higher glycemic index, so I believe that's like they consider that like bad or something like that.
right.
And it's like it's not like the table isn't supposed to show you what's good and bad. It's just supposed to give you an idea of different foods,
Hmm.
right? It's not like a diet of saying only eat these foods. I think
Yeah,
that's a bad way to look at it. Um, but speaking of that, I'd also like to get into like a lot of people suffer from like that beer belly.
right.
And then they say that if they don't, they're like, oh, well, I'm eating less calories, I'm doing all this, but I still can't lose this belly. And then like the rest of the body looks good. It's just that belly. I mean, do you have any points on that or anything? Maybe what that could be? What do you want to
Well, particularly for men, um, not you, but like men in general tend to store more body fat in their midsection. So even if they are lean otherwise, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need to lose more body fat in order to lose the beer belly or whatever it may be. Um, yeah, there's a lot of different things that can help make that look worse, like bloating, different types of digestive problems, things like that. But in general, most of the time when people have a beer belly and they are like, oh, my arms and legs look fine, but I can't lose my belly fat, it's mostly just because they need to lose overall body fat. Um, do you have any different opinions on that, or what do you think?
I mean, yeah, because usually when I have people tell me that, like, oh, I'm eating less calories, I'm like, are you? Because like you're not
Yeah,
like
probably
they're
not.
like the day before you tell me you're not counting, and they think, oh, it's going good. I ate salmon or that. Like, yeah, you can still eat healthy, but you could also overeat when you eat healthy. It's not
Yeah.
impossible. Um, so I think that's like a big thing. Also, I know there's a good like paper towel analogy. It's like if you
Mhm.
get a thick paper towel and then a thin paper towel, and then as you burn fat or as you lose fat, you're losing paper on a thick paper towel, and then you're losing paper on the thin paper towel. And I believe your midsection is the thick one. So it's like
Uh-huh.
even though you're using paper, it doesn't look like you're losing anything, but it looks like you're losing a lot through like the thin paper towel because you're making a bigger difference on your face and all those other things.
Right.
So that was a good analogy I remember hearing about.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good. I think that most of the time, like you said, with tracking, people are like, I can't lose any more body fat, and it doesn't really matter if it's in any particular location. They're like, I'm eating a caloric deficit, I'm not losing enough body fat. It really comes down to two things. Are you tracking correctly? And are you doing enough exercise? And so, yeah, you might be eating less calories than you were eating when you were maintaining your body weight, but if you lost some weight, and now you're eating a big deficit, again, your NEAT can decrease, so your maintenance may change. And you also might just be bad at tracking. Like, I've had people that are like, oh, yeah, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating chicken and salmon. And I'm like, well, how much oil are you cooking it in? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I just pour enough oil to fill the bottom of the pan. And I'm like, to fill the bottom of the pan, dude, that's like 400 calories of oil. Like, you gotta chill with that. Like, well, a teaspoon
Um,
is more than enough. So,
that reminds me. When it comes to like cooking, I believe just what was it, vegetables. There's a chef that I really like. His name is Francis Malman. Malman. He's Argentinian, I believe. He doesn't necessarily do any oil or anything when he cooks some vegetables. He says that what do you, it's on the tip of my tongue. Do you know when you burn like a food and it looks like roasted or something like a
yeah, the
vegetable?
Maillard reaction. Is that
Yeah,
what you're talking about? Where it's like
yeah,
brown?
not the scientific term, just like the regular
Oh,
term. I think it's like the roast.
seared?
I guess so. He says that that's like a separate. He said that that's a flavor of its own, so he doesn't
It
like
is.
add anything, and he just believes that like adding oil and everything to add more like I guess flavor to it is just taking away from like the natural flavor that this provides. So I
Hmm.
started going by that, and I think I like his idea on that. And it's like whenever I do cook something or vegetables or something, and I just wait till they get a little smeared. I like to think that that's like a natural flavor that it just provides on its own. And
Yeah.
to me that just cuts down a certain amount of calories. 'Cause I remember I did used to put a lot of oil on everything. I used to make like vegetables.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have to add oil, I have to add this. You don't have to do that. You could just put it on the pan and it
Right.
tastes
I
good.
mean, the main reason why adding the oil, especially if it's a neutral oil where it doesn't really have a strong flavor, the main reason why it helps with browning or the Maillard reaction is because the oil can transfer heat very efficiently through a larger surface area. And so that just allows the Maillard reaction to occur faster because basically how it works is like once the food reaches a particular temperature, then the Maillard reaction starts to take place, and that's what causes the browning, whether it's on vegetables, carrots, broccoli, chicken, steak, whatever it is. Anything where you get like the crust and like the browning, that's called the Maillard reaction.
Yeah, that's something cool that people could kind of take home today now when they think about cooking.
Yeah, they're like, oh, why is my chicken turning brown when I sear it? Yeah, it's Maillard reaction. It's to do with protein breakdown. Um, yeah, I think that's a pretty good um, summary of everything we wanted to talk about. So I think we should just wrap up with a quick summary of everything, some take-home messages for different types of people, and then call it for our first episode.
Definitely, and what I would also like to add, like, what can we kind of like the best advice we could give to have someone lose? I know summer's like right around the corner. We have like
Hmm.
a month or so, and like if you want to see the biggest drastic changes in your body, it just comes down to like losing body fat. That's gonna cause like the biggest changes in your body. So if
Absolutely.
we could make the summary, and then we could give like certain tips on like how to or like just a take home message on what you can do to, I guess, lose the most in a healthy way, just to look
Hmm.
better by summer. And that's at the end of the day, that's what people want.
Right.
So
So just to summarize some stuff we talked about, there are some positives and negatives to taking a steep caloric deficit. Again, steeper caloric deficits may decrease your NEAT more than you would want, which would cause you to not lose weight at the rate you would want. For people that don't have a lot of experience dieting, it may be more beneficial to just do a traditional cut at a slower rate of loss than a mini cut at a more aggressive rate of loss. Alternatively, you can use a mini cut for the first 4 weeks and then transition to a traditional cut for later 8 weeks if you have a longer amount of fat to lose. And I would say if you have more than 10% body weight that you want to lose, then I would not recommend necessarily a mini cut. In terms of different strategies, you can try and match your food volume and do high and low caloric days in order to make dieting easier. And if you plan to go out on the weekends, you can and drink and eat you can plan accordingly by eating less calories a couple days before, or if it's just food and not alcohol, you can eat less calories that same day. So a couple take-home messages if you want to add.
Yeah, when we talk about mini cutting, it's not also about feeling better too, but it's also about muscle growth because there comes a certain point like the more body fat you have in your body, the harder it might be to build muscle. But I think the ranges of like 15% body fat it was 12 to 15 was like the best way to kind of like build muscle.
Yeah, I'm not
15.
sure about the P ratio research. I'm pretty sure it's not really well established, but anecdotally, like, yeah, it might be harder to train when you're at higher body fat percentages.
Yeah, and it's like if so like when you kind of lower your body fat a little bit, it just again it could be a little more beneficial and you could have a little more certainty that you are building more muscle in that sense. So sometimes a lot of bodybuilders or you know people who are bulking, they would cut down in fat just to kind of like lower because sometimes if the fat kind of like gets too high, then it could start ramping up pretty much higher, probably even more than the muscle. So they're like, okay, well let me just kind of easy down, cut down a little bit. I guess kind of balance it out, and then now we could continue with building muscle and burning fat at like a nice proportional pace. Um, I mean, that's how I see it. I know Dr. Mike talked about that a bit ago. Um, Another thing for cutting is that I did mention the palm portions. A lot
Hmm.
of people like to, I know counting calories can sometimes be annoying, but I know for some people they find it easier just to do like palm portions. So like your first meal, it's like two palms of protein and then one hand of carbohydrate.
Yeah, that can definitely work. And then you just decrease the carbohydrate amount. Yeah,
Yeah, with the palm portions too, it's like it's not as accurate as the macros,
right.
but it's accurate enough that you are losing weight. And if you aren't, just like with calories and all that, like if you're counting calories regardless, you can always uh if you get the app or whatever app you use to count calories, it's not going to be perfectly accurate. So what you can do is you could keep that up for like 2 weeks, and then at the end of the 2 weeks, if you don't see like a huge difference, you might see some difference just because again water retention and all that.
Yeah.
But maybe cut it off like 100 by 200 calories, right? So if you have 1,700 calories, you've been doing it for like 4 weeks, 3 weeks, and you haven't seen any difference. Cut 200 calories off, and now you have like 1,500 calories, right? So just
Hmm.
keep doing that, and then see if you see a difference, right? Same thing with the palm portions. Like if you're having like 3 palms of protein, 1 palm of carbohydrate, and then like half of like this of fats, just cut you know, a palm of, or just do like half a palm of carbohydrate maybe, or just 1 palm of protein, something like that.
Yeah, and I
Just
think that that method is really good for college students that are in dining halls where it's not really practical to try and track their food and bring a food scale in there. So for those of you college students who are on meal plans, the Palm method may be useful for you bulking and cutting. Um, in terms of key takeaways, if you are trying to look your best for this summer, um, the more strict you want to be, the more fat you can lose. So for those of you who are more experienced dieting, you can absolutely take a mini cut for 4 to 6 weeks and lose as much fat as you can in that amount of time, and you will definitely have the most drastic transformation. But for those of you who are less experienced with dieting, I would suggest probably taking a slower approach, maybe for um, implementing like 3 to 4 low days and the rest of the days being high days, and just see how much weight you can lose. Because in general, any body fat reduction up to a certain point, when you get like really, really lean, is going to probably make you look better. And so, if that's your goal, just to lose some body fat, any of these approaches that we talked about today will be extremely useful for you going into summer.
yeah, you can't, you actually have to have a plan and be consistent with it. I think when it comes to like this little time span, I don't think it's going to be the best idea to start assuming that you're eating less calories. Uh, have a plan, plan it out, know what you're going to eat, know what you have, and then make the most out of that. To just say and start utilizing your calories if you want, or just having a strict deficit if you like.
Yep, and if you guys are looking to hire a coach to help you lose some weight going into the summer, again, you can reach out to either of us on Instagram and we'd be happy to reach back out. I personally do have quite a few spots open for coaching going into the summer, and I'm assuming you do as well. So if you are interested, please reach out to us and let us know in the comments below or on Instagram if you have any topics that you would like us to discuss, or if you have any particular questions regarding the stuff we talked about today.
Oh, great.
I think that's a good time to wrap it off. So this is capping off the first episode. Stay tuned for some future videos and other podcasts regarding different topics. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye.